We've talked about Netzach and we've talked about Tiferet. So, what about the major arcana that connects the two of them? That is the Death card, and this is one of my favorite illustrations of the Death card. I just love the colors. I love the movement of the card. It's so dynamic, and the skeleton here is he is actually dancing. It's like the old medieval images of the Danse Macabre. And this really reminds me of a sailing ship. I've never seen anybody else say that it reminds them of a sailing ship, but it's just the way he's holding the scythe and the way the bubbles look connected by the lines. It reminds me very much of an old sailing ship with all the rigging. And it is a very nautical card. It's ruled by Scorpio, which of course is a water sign. And you also have a fish, and the fish, it's sort of at waist high. So are we underwater? Are we not? And the fish is the symbol of the Hebrew letter for this card, which is Nun. You can also see in the card a snake and a scorpion, and those are both images of Scorpio. So what is the hat? What is his hat? It's got this interesting hat. Well, this is the crown of Osiris, and Osiris is the Egyptian god of resurrection, rebirth, transformation. So you have this lovely Egyptian imagery that Crowley liked so much. And what does the card mean? Well, this is a card about your ego. In relation to the Tree of Life, this is about your ego, and it is about either gaining an ego or losing your ego. And that depends on which way you're moving on the Tree of Life. By that, I mean, if you're moving from, a 7 to a 6, then you are losing your ego. If you're moving from the 6 to the 7, you're gaining an ego. But it's kind of you gain one, you lose something else, because what happens in Tiferet is that we lose our understanding and our awareness of our divine selves. When that happens, then we travel the path of the death card, and we wake up transformed in Netzach, believing that we are individuals and that we are separate from each other and that we're separate from divinity. When we're first born, very young children, babies don't recognize the difference between themselves and their mother, but as we grow up, we start to do that. So that's one thing that happens when you move from Tiferet to Netzach. You gain an ego. If you're moving from Netzach to Tiferet, if you want to rise up the tree of life, you have to lose your ego. You become aware that you're not an individual, you're not completely separate. We have this divine core in common. Now, one of the fun things about working, particularly here in the center of the Tree of Life, I think, is that you have a lot of resonances and parallels that you can work with just out of interest to look at some of the other cards. One of them is the Lovers. Now, the Lovers is, you can see that it's just up the Tree of Life from the Death card, and it also represents division and coming back together. It is the alchemical marriage, which is coming together, and it's also division because it is part of the pair of the Lovers and the Art card, which is Solvay and Coagula alchemical formula. This is the dividing part where you divide things apart and you get rid of what you don't need, and then you're going to put them back together and have something stronger in the Art card. And also in the Lovers card, it's associated with Zayin, the Hebrew letter Zayin, which means sword. So you do have some very strong separating imagery here. And it's just very interesting to see on either side of Tiphareth that you have two cards that represent coming together or being divided apart. And like the Death card with the Lovers, if you're moving up the Tree of Life, this is how I read anyway, moving up the Tree of Life from Tiferet to Binah, you're coming together. Something is coming together. If you're moving down the Tree of Life from Binah to Tiferet, that's where the separation happens. Another interesting relationship, if you look at the Death card, you see that its number is 13. And if you add those digits together, 1 plus 3 is 4. So here the relationship is on either side of this kind of imaginary dividing line that cuts through Tiferet. Tiferet is where we go to the bottom half of the Tree of Life, which is more earthly, more physical, or the top half of the Tree of Life, which is more spiritual, more notional if you're thinking about plans or a project. So what do you think it might mean the relationship between these two cards, that you have the Death card and the Emperor. What do you think when you see them together? And one more interesting relationship, if you look on the other side of the middle pillar, the Death card, you have the Devil. Now, I think that this is a really interesting pairing too. Is this, what do they have in common? You think about what they have in common and then what they don't have in common. What they do have in common is ego, but different kinds of ego, and the physical self. I think you could associate the physical self with the Devil and the Death card. So what do you think about all that? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.